Okay, let's open a word of prayer. Excuse me while I take a drink. Let's pray. Lord, thanks for our time together today. Pray you'll bless it. Use this to inform us and bless our hearts with this. And always remember that we're not to be given over to a spirit of fear, but of confidence and power that we have through the Lord Jesus Christ. Thank you for the time that we have to gather together today. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, first hour, I did the sermon. It's on Life of Messiah. What did I title that thing? Oh, the Messiah's pre-existence. Couldn't even remember the title. How am I supposed to expect you to remember anything? So today we're going to talk about starting to fall. And I will say I spent most of my time on the sermon first hour. Today, I have been running around trying to put together some things. I have a few ideas that I want to talk about. There's some things that are very troubling. I'll be here next Sunday doing a prophecy update and then gone to Israel for a couple Sundays. We'll try to do some things and put some things up while I'm over there as I have time. But I'm not sure because I'm not sure exactly where I'll be and how good the Wi-Fi will be or the internet speeds will be where I'm at, but I'll be meeting with some people. We're going to some amazing sites, and so we'll try to update you on that. So today we're going to talk about starting to fall. I want to give you a little bit of an update on a couple of items. First of all, Wednesday night, 7 p.m., will be the next Prophecy Roundtable on technocracy, transhumanism, AI, Mark of the Beast, that MOTB means Mark of the Beast, technology, tech intrusion. Have Britt Gillette, Scott Townsend, Patrick Wood, and Pete Garcia joining me, as far as I know. There's a lot going on in that space. I don't know if I have time to go into it today. We will talk about Peter Thiel, who is currently doing a series on the Antichrist and end times. He's one of the tech bros, multi-billionaire, probably worth $24 billion. And he essentially came out this week and said, look, anyone who opposes technology development is the Antichrist, will be the Antichrist, or is in an Antichrist spirit. And what you're seeing is in the world today is it seems like everything's being inverted. Good is bad, bad is good. I mean, what the Bible says is true. Last week I did talk at the Hope for Our Times conference in Texas. My talk was, I thought, we're supposed to be culturally sensitive, right? To our audience. So it was in Texas, so I called it Prophecy Roundup, Talking Turkey in Texas. And the only thing I couldn't figure out how to do is how to put smoking in there. I would have done smoking. And they do have great barbecue in Texas. And the people were amazing. The food was great. And we had a great time talking. I'll also be back in Israel for a media summit in early November. And this is sort of my wheel of prophecy. And if I could spin this thing, it'd be spinning like a 78 RPM record. Now, a lot of people are going to go, what's a 78 RPM record? And ask Wes. He knows what those are. He probably has some in his library at his house. So I've updated some of my chess pieces. I'll just go left to right so you know what they represent. Israel left, U.S., United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Russia. Kind of cool, right? The Golden Dome. And what I do is I wrap the flag around them. And then we've got Iran, which is kind of broken right now. Hezbollah, Syria, which was a proxy of theirs, Houthis, and Hamas. And then, of course, we have Erdogan hugging his Qatar chess piece because he gets funded by Qatar. That's the Qatari flag, and then there's oil rig on top because that's how the Qataris get all their money. Then we have the new Syrian government, and then, of course, the Turkish check piece, and it goes over. You remember this one? I've updated this one a little bit. This is, a lot of people, when this cover came out, a lot of people in the prophecy community go, oh, Macron's the Antichrist, right? Remember that? And the response to that is, at least my response partly was, can't the devil do better? I mean, And he was in the news this week, may mention that or may not. And so this was my French chess piece, the French flag with the Eiffel Tower on top. And then guess what? French, the white flag. And so I thought I would update both the cover and the French chess piece. And so this is what it looks like now. And Macron is his little Napoleon sinking into the waves. So again, Prophecy Roundtable, Wednesday night at 7. We'll cover those things. And everything is just really moving along very, very fast. And so if I repeat myself, I apologize, but I was very, very busy this week, and I had to spend some time with good old, what's her name? Pam. No, I'm just kidding. It's very busy around our house. So I think I'm going to start off with a couple of speeches from the UN. I'm going to play a little bit longer talk. I'm not going to play Trump. I thought that you see what happened to President Trump at the UN. He and Melania were getting on the escalator stopped. Then he gets to the podium and the teleprompter doesn't work. Now that doesn't stop President Trump from talking, as you've probably gathered. I was joking with Pam the other day that I heard a report that Trump was actually going to start his second news conference since taking office back in January, that the first one was still going on. And because he just does seem to be, he does seem to talk a lot. That seems to be his modus operandi. So Trump gave a speech. It was interesting. The New York Times, when they reported on the speech, they sort of mockingly said, Trump thinks I forget what the title of the editorial was. Trump thinks he has the world in his hands. But the big picture that they put up on their website, it was black and white in the newspaper, but you see that they took a picture of his hand to show that he's got a bad hand or there's something going on with his hand. And of course, we have to say that because we didn't do any of that with Joe Biden for 4 years. Now Trump, I mean, he's almost 80, so you would expect some of the things to start breaking down a little bit. He does seem to have a lot of energy. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the speeches at the UN. This is Al-Quds newspaper. I think it's published in the UK, Al-Quds Al-Arabi, and you can imagine the orientation of it. And so what they did was kind of a summary on the front page of some of the important speeches that took place. We're going to look at King Abdullah II of Jordan, just because he speaks in English, the Emir of Qatar, Donald Trump, Antonio Guterres, Erdogan of Turkey, and Abdullah, the next to last one there, left to right, is King Abdullah II of Jordan. And everybody was focused on the two-state solution. We got to have a two-state solution. Israel's committing genocide. That was sort of the common theme. It's almost as if nothing else in the world is happening. I watch, unfortunately, I see a lot of stuff from people on the woke right that are anti-Israel, extremely anti-Israel. One of my friends suggested that we should call them the third right, which I thought was a pretty good play on words. I think Benjamin Netanyahu picked up on that on a meeting with some Zionist, I guess you would call them Zionist influencers, pro-Israel influencers in New York yesterday. I'll talk a little bit about that. But of course, the Emir of Qatar, he was upset with Qatar. He was upset with Israel. Israel bombed Qatar. I actually met with a guy in Texas who was flying here lives in the Caucasus region, north of Turkey, not south of Russia. You can probably gather what countries he might be living in. And when he flew, he actually showed me his ticket. He connected through Doha. And he lands in Doha just after Israel has bombed the Hamas meeting in Doha. He said there's smoke in the air. You can see the plumes of smoke rising just off the airport there. And these things change a lot. And so what happened after that bombing took place, I guess I didn't get to talk about this last week because I didn't do an update. So after that bombing took place, immediately the Arabs and Muslims have a big joint emergency meeting in Doha. Everybody gets together. Erdogan, all the Muslim leaders, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, everybody's there railing on Israel. We got to solve this solution, this Palestinian Gaza issue, and the only way to do that is a two-state solution to bring peace and security to everybody in the region. And it's one of these things, we live at this time where everybody is talking in Bible prophecy terms, even though they don't want to admit that Bible prophecy is really, they don't believe in Bible prophecy, but everybody's using the terms. I had a picture here. This is a real, usually it's a mess, okay? Today, I'm confessing that it's a mess. So that makes it okay, right? I guess I don't have the picture. But we've seen the Abraham Accord sign, right? From abrahamshield.org. And the picture is Trump and Netanyahu in the middle, surrounded by 10 kings or princes or leaders of governments, which is kind of an interesting number. Some people are drawing some conclusions from that. I'm not going to say that those people are way out in left field or anything like that. They're actually making some good points as this alliance comes together. But the one picture that I saw, when you translate the Hebrew, it says a time for war, a time for settlement. And then below it, it said, moving to a new Abrahamic covenant. And that's kind of interesting language that you're getting on these billboards that were appearing all over Israel. So the Qatari emir, he was upset. Before the big meeting started, they had a two-state solution meeting chaired by Emmanuel Macron of France and Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. Of course, Trump was there and spoke. And I will say he was in rare form. And PM, those are my notebooks that are on the chair beside you, so you don't need to worry about those. And don't read them because it's informational research for me. Somebody brought to me. So, I mean, Trump was a barn burner. You people, you believe in this climate change. You're destroying the economies. You're weak. You don't know what you're doing. You need to get back to the good old oil and gas days because that's what's going to bring things about. And I think he used the example of Aberdeen, which is in Scotland, and to the east of Aberdeen is the North Sea, oil rich, and they're not really drilling there. They put up all these windmills, and the windmills don't work all the time. That's the problem with solar. That's the problem with windmills. And as we drove around the West, there are places where you see thousands of acres covered with these solar panels. So what do you gather from that? Well, one, if they got thousands of acres of solar panels, they can't grow anything there. And you don't eat solar panels, you eat food. But they have all these big data centers. We'll talk more about that. These data centers are just, they're growing like weeds grow in your lawn. I mean, they're all over the place. There's a place up in Indiana where they have a data center. They have, I think, 8 buildings so far. They have 22 more they're going to build, like some of the things out here in New Albany. And all these things take a lot of power and energy and water. It's really taxing resources here in the United States and other places around the world where they're building these. So Qatar was really upset when Israel had bombed Doha. I mean, so it's sort of like, well, we can give refuge to Hamas, but don't you dare say or do anything about it. It's, this is Muslim Brotherhood, Qatar. They support and fund the Muslim Brotherhood. They fund Al Jazeera. And Trump, of course, spoke. Antonio Guterres, you can imagine what he said. We need a two-state solution. Everybody, it's like this broken record that you hear. Abdullah, you'll hear him in just a minute. Erdogan said the same thing. What did nobody mention? Nobody, I'm pretty sure nobody anywhere in any speech at the UN mentioned the slaughter of Christians that is going on in front of us right now. Dozens of Christians killed almost every day in Nigeria and other places. Probably 100,000 in the last 15 years in Nigeria alone. Christians have been slaughtered, and I mean slaughtered. Thousands of churches have been burned and destroyed, and there's not a word of protest anywhere on the left, anywhere on college campuses or anywhere about actual slaughter that's been going on. Everything is focused on Israel and Gaza. And that's kind of prophetic in and of itself. So I'm going to do a little bit of Abdullah. I'll play a little bit of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Then we'll go and we'll talk about what I think is probably one of the more significant developments. And then if we have time, I'll do a couple of other things. So here we go. So here is, and if you want to translate the Arabic, you can go put that into Google Translate. This is kind of a summary of Erdogan's speech, talking about we got Israel's committing genocide. Israel's evil. Israel's bad. Never mentions what's happened in Syria. Never mentions what Turkey's done to Armenians. Never mentions what Turkey has done to Kurds over the years. All of that is irrelevant. Let's focus on Israel, because that place, somebody's. There we go, is going off. And so this was in the Jordanian newspaper. And of course, what did they choose for the big picture about the UN meetings was the vote that took place a couple weeks ago that there should be a two-state solution in the Middle East. And it was 142 for, 10 against, and 12 abstentions. If you look at a current map of the world, there are maybe 10 or 12 countries that have not bought on to the two-state solution thing. I think Italy, a couple other countries in Europe, United States, some of the Pacific Islands, maybe a couple in old Eastern Europe. Everybody else, two-state solution, create a Palestinian state within Israel, everything will be solved. So I'm going to play Abdullah the second just because he's easier to understand. You don't have to listen to the interpreter try to interpret what he says. But I want you to listen carefully to some of these things. This might be 10 minutes long. I think it's important because Abdullah is effectively in control of the Temple Mount, at least in practice. So here we go, King Abdullah of Jordan.
The Assembly will hear an address by His Majesty King Abdullah II Ibn al-Hussein, King of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, Your Excellencies. Another year, another UN General Assembly, and another occasion when I stand before you to address the same issue, the conflict in the Middle East. And not for the first time, developments on the ground have made me question the worth and utility of words in capturing the magnitude of the crisis. Yet not speaking about it would signal acceptance of the situation and abandonment of our humanity. And that I will not do. Our UN General Assembly was born 80 years ago, pledging to learn from, not repeat, history. The world vowed never again. However, for almost as long, Palestinians have been living through a cruel cycle of yet again, bombed indiscriminately, yet again, killed, injured, and maimed yet again, displaced and dispossessed yet again, denied rights, dignity, their basic humanity yet again. So I must ask, how long? How long will it be before we find a resolution to this conflict, one that safeguards the rights of all sides and allows a level of normalcy in the lives of the families at its core? How long will it be before I stand before you and speak not of suffering and devastation in my region, but of prospect, prosperity, and potential? Sadly, this is not the only conflict in our world. And some may say that other wars are also devastating. But the Palestinian-Israeli conflict remains unique. It is the longest standing conflict in the world. An illegal occupation of a helpless population by a self-declared democratic nation, and a flagrant violation of repeated UN resolutions, international law, and human rights conventions. A failure that should have elicited outrage and action, especially from major democracies. Instead, it has been met with decades of inertia. My friends, the war in Gaza marks one of the darkest moments in this institution's history. But although it is today's horror, the injustice stretches back decades. The Palestinian-Israeli conflict has been on the UN agenda throughout its 8 decades of existence. How long will we be satisfied with condemnation after condemnation without concrete action?
Here's some questions for King. How long will you be satisfied keeping Palestinian Arabs in refugee camps in your country under your control between you, your father and grandfather for 80 years? You big hypocrite. The guy whose ideological predecessor, the Hajj al-Husseini, worked with a guy in Europe, first name Adolf, to get rid of the Jewish problem. You're not even from there. You were imported from Saudi Arabia, your family, to take control of that. And you're not, you might have an elected parliament, but you're not a democracy. You're the ruler. I've done some unpacking, by the way, on King Abdullah. I believe that his family's investments will generate for him somewhere between $1 and $2 billion a year. Very, very wealthy. People live in, I've been in Jordan, they live in squalor, they still live in refugee camps. They live in refugee camps in Syria. They live in refugee camps in Lebanon, in Jordan. It's beyond my comprehension that people don't call them out on this, so I'll continue.
When it comes to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, it seems that what unfolds in the halls of power is theory. The struggles and suffering on the ground is reality. For decades, we have seen several attempts to achieve a solution by interim agreements and temporary stopgaps, none that delivered on the end game. In fact, many would argue these processes served as a distraction, as Israel grabbed more land, expanded illegal settlements, demolished homes, and displaced entire neighborhoods. Muslim and Christian holy sites in Jerusalem have been vandalized and desecrated by those under government protection. And throughout all these years, Israeli families too.
By the way, that's a very common theme. I have speech after speech after speech of this guy, and he always talks about Christian and Muslim holy sites in Jerusalem. He never mentions that other word except to say that they're destroying and desecrating these sites. It was the Muslims under the Mufti that he controls that went in and dug up the Temple Mount to destroy the evidence of Jewish presence at the Temple Mount. That's why they have the Temple Mount Sifting Project. So, anyway.
Not been able to live in true security because military action cannot bring the safety they need. Nowhere is that more evident than in Gaza. More than 60,000 Palestinians killed, 50,000 children injured or killed, miles of burnt out rubble. Neighborhoods, hospitals, schools, farms, even mosques and churches in ruins. Widespread starvation. And what we are seeing is only a glimpse, because never in our modern history has the lenses of international media been obstructed like this from capturing the reality on the ground. Almost 2 years in, and the cruelty of this military campaign continues unabated. Furthermore, the current Israeli government's provocative calls for a so-called Greater Israel can only be realized through the blatant violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of its neighbors. And there is nothing great about that. I can't help but wonder if a similar outrageous call were made by an Arab leader, would it be met with the same global apathy? The international community must stop entertaining the illusion that this government is a willing partner for peace. Far from it. Its actions on the ground are dismantling the very foundations on which peace could stand, and intentionally burying the very idea of a Palestinian state. It has shown how little it respects the sovereignty of other countries, as we have seen in flagrant violations in Lebanon, Iran, Syria, Tunisia, and most recently, Qatar.
Okay, I think I probably need to stop this for our blood pressure purposes, but listen, I heard a great radio program or saw a thread on Twitter. I can't remember where I see so much stuff anymore. I can't remember where I saw it. But it was a Jewish guy from Israel and a lady who claimed to be a Palestinian Arab, and she was complaining that my family was forced out of Nablus by the Israelis, by the Israeli government. And the Israeli guy goes, well, when did that happen? 1949. Okay, now what should trigger something in your head about that? There was a war of independence in 1948. In 1949, Nablus was controlled by his country, Jordan. That's when the people left, a lot of them. Yeah, some left beforehand, I'm not going to deny that. But historical facts are historical facts. Jordan controlled the areas known as the West Bank. I prefer the terms Judea and Samaria. I think they're much more accurate historically, biblically. But his country controlled that from 1948 to 1967. During that time, Jews could not go to the cave of the tomb of the patriarchs in Hebron, because Jordan didn't let them go to their second holiest site. They were not allowed to go to the Western Wall. In fact, if you're on my tour, I think we're in the process of adding something where there's a video. It's there in the, where the menorah is in the old city of Jerusalem, in that I love the Jewish quarter of the old city, maybe because it's newer. I don't know. And by the way, this is just an aside. When I go over there, I have Google Maps, and I say, okay, I need walking directions from here to downtown Jerusalem, and my map will say it's 3/4 of a mile, mostly flat. Okay. And I'm looking at a walkway that goes like up this with a bunch of stairs off and on in it. And I'm trying to what does mostly flat mean to those guys at Google? I mean, because it must mean that it's sort of smooth. You know, you don't have to climb a wall, but you have to walk uphill. So if you're ever in Israel, and the other thing, like when you're walking around the old city, you get onto the eastern side. In my Google Maps app, the last time I did this, kept saying, you're entering a foreign country. Do you want to enter a foreign country? I'm in Jerusalem. What foreign country? There is no foreign country there. And so even the people at Google Maps, and they think artificial intelligence is going to be that smart. There's some things that kind of undermine that. But anyway, so Abdullah refuses to ignore the historical facts. And if you go out of Jerusalem on Route 60 up towards Ramallah, you'll see that, talked about it many times, that steel skeleton structure. That was his father's palace that was being built in 1967 that stopped. It was being built, by the way, I believe they found some evidence of a palace that existed before that on that area. It was built by a guy named Saul, the first king of Israel. Why would Abdullah build on that important historical site? Because, not Abdullah, Hussein, who everybody thought, oh, he was so great, he has an American, well, his fourth wife was an American wife. And why would we worry about that? I mean, why would he build there? It's not a big deal. It's because he was trying to make a statement. I'm the king. I'm building on the site of your first king. I'm more important than your first king. We have taken you over. That's what was being said. Nobody says about that. So anyway, so Bibi Netanyahu came and he spoke at the UN. This is the Jordanian newspaper talking about some of the things that he's closed. By the way, there's an important crossing. There's a couple of them, border crossings between Israel and Jordan. There was a shooting and some of you have been across the Allenby Bridge. And by the way, when we talk about the Jordan River and the Allenby Bridge, you know, there are creeks that are more dramatic waterways between here and around Sunbury than the Jordan River is. It's just this, even now today, it's pretty much a trickle of water. And the Allenby Bridge is just sort of a 2-lane bridge over the river. But it's an important border crossing. But there was a shooting there this week. And so that border crossing, at least the last I heard, was still closed, but they're talking about opening it. Because some guys came across from Jordan, they shot and killed a couple Israeli soldiers, is my recollection. It's crazy. So he talked about, he said this, an independent state is not a reward for the Palestinians, but rather an indisputable right. Wrong. The war on Gaza is one of the darkest events in the history of the United Nations. For the last 80 years, this is what's the darkest thing in the history of the United Nations for the last 80 years. Calls for a greater Israel can only be achieved by violating country sovereignty. Oh, you mean like when you were imported from Saudi Arabia to take over the Hashemite kingdom? Because you lost Saudi Arabia. And by the way, your family was also given control of another country called Iraq. What about the sovereignty of that? It's a time for peace for the United Nations, and the United Nations must answer this call to translate it. The conflict has been on the UN agenda for 8 decades. Okay. 2 years later, the brutality of the aggression on Gaza continues unabated. Wait a minute. Why did Israel go into Gaza? Was there anything that prompted it? Are there any hostages? Did you mention the hostages, King Abdullah? Maddening. So Prime Minister Netanyahu came, play a little bit of, I want you to watch what happens at the beginning. of Netanyahu's speech.
The Assembly will continue its consideration of Agenda Item 8 entitled General Debate. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of the State of Israel. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly. Please, order in the hall. Please, order in the hall.
What happened was almost 80-90% of the country is left.
Please, order in the hall.
You can see it's pretty empty. But Prime Minister Netanyahu persisted. So here we go. We'll move forward.
Last year, I stood at this podium and I showed this map. This map. It shows the curse of Iran's terror axis.
By the way, there's a QR code. You can find this. You can scan it on your phone. It will take you to a website that shows videos from Hamas that they uploaded from October 7th. But it's very disturbing. So, just don't do it without thinking about it ahead of time. But I don't know. I'm sure Abdul has never seen these, but or if he did, he doesn't care. So here we go.
This axis threatened the peace of the entire world. It threatened the stability of our region and the very existence of my country, Israel. Iran was rapidly developing a massive nuclear weapons program and a massive ballistic missile program. These were meant not only to destroy Israel, they were meant also to threaten the United States and blackmail nations everywhere. From Gaza, Yahya Sinwar dispatched waves of Hamas terrorists. They stormed into Israel on October 7th and committed acts of unspeakable savagery. From Lebanon, Hassan Nasrallah had launched thousands of missiles and rockets at our cities, terrorizing our citizens. In Syria, the murderous dictator Assad hosted Iran's forces, tightening a noose of death around our throats. In Yemen, the Houthis launched ballistic missiles at Israel while choking global trade at the mouth of the Red Sea. So what's happened over the past year? We've hammered the Houthis, including yesterday. We crushed the bulk of Hamas's terror machine. We crippled Hezbollah, taking out most of its leaders and much of its weapons arsenal. You remember those beepers, the pagers? We paged Hezbollah. And believe me, they got the message. And thousands of terrorists dropped to the ground. We destroyed Assad's armaments in Syria. We deterred Iran's Shiite militias in Iraq. And most importantly, and above anything else that I could say to you or that we did in this past year, in this past decade, we devastated Iran's atomic weapons and ballistic missiles programs. So here's where things stand today. Half the Houthi leadership in Yemen, gone. Yahya Sinwar in Gaza, gone. Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon, gone. The Assad regime in Syria, gone. Those militias in Iraq, well, the rising lion, that's from the Bible. This rising lion, that's from the Bible. This 12-day war will go down in the annals of military history. Our daring pilots neutralized Iran's missile defenses and took control of the skies over Tehran. And you saw this. Israeli fighter pilots and American B-2 pilots bombed Iran's nuclear enrichment sites. I want to thank President Trump for his bold and decisive action.